and the environment collide, which often leads to fruitful discussions and critical conversation, not unlike when we think about the important conversations we need to have in inclusion, diversity, and equity. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Dana Hogue.
I can't share my video. The host can do it. Oh, let's see if I can do it now.
Thanks, Dana. Appreciate that.
Now it's letting me. Okay. Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. The main reason I'm here is just to tell you that the college does consider this important enough that it is a strategic objective. And so we want to make sure that the good work you hear today is not just an annual conference, that it's something we live and breathe. So the committee that Dr. Pritchett put together and to look at this, he asked us for a big idea, and we thought that the main thing we need to do is make sure there's some sort of center established in the college, something that makes sure this keeps going, that this doesn't fall down or doesn't stop happening. So we're only in the planning stages, so nothing's for sure, but that center is our main push. Our goal is to build enough capacity and capability that we can make sure nobody in the college feels excluded. So that's really our main objective, and we don't want to give a lot of details now because the next step is to ask stakeholders what they think. So we'll be coming out and asking you folks and others about how we can do a good job with this. But when we get that center, we hope that it will have the expertise and the capability to make sure no student, no faculty member, no staff member, no partner of ours feels excluded or unfairly treated. So, so that's the main thing, is just to let you know that this is not going to be set aside. We're going to continue to work on this. And I think, I'm not sure what the timing will be, but we're going to be working on trying to get a center going over the next year, at least the planning stages to present to the college. And that's really all I have to say.
Hey, Dana, thank you. I love the idea of the center. We've been able to talk a little bit about this as a team and how that'll have some aspects that'll be about improving community within the college, but also how we intersect with external stakeholders too, and modeling what that could look like. So kind of a far-reaching approach. If somebody had some ideas or questions and wanted to reach out to the team, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think we're going to let us invite them at a time. Now you can email me or anybody on the team, Elias and Tori, and a lot of the people on the team that put this together are part of that team. So I'd say contact the college or any of us if you really want to be involved, and we'll include you. But we're going to be reaching out soon. And one of the things we're most worried about, or one of the things we're worried about is when you're looking at inclusiveness, how do we know there's not a group out there that we don't even know is excluded? You know, suppose there's some group that doesn't even do anything with CSU and we don't do anything with them. So we want to really work hard to try to branch out and find out where those pockets of, you know, inclusion have not been done well, and really be as inclusive as we can about a committee about inclusivity. So so we do encourage people to contact us if they feel we've not seen them as a group we need to contact. So please just contact me or you, the college, or anybody on this program today.
Hey, thanks, Dana. I appreciate it. And also give a shout out to Paula Mills, Chief of Staff in the College of Ag Sciences, who's been overseeing the entire strategic planning process and making sure we're assembled, we get the tools we need, and Paula can help direct inquiries as well if somebody would like to reach out there. And I see we've dropped in, Addie Ellie has dropped in some email addresses for those that serve on this team that include Dana Hogue, Elias Quinones, and Tori Anderson, who helps to lead the Diversity Catalyst team at the College of Ag Sciences. So Addie, thanks for dropping that in the chat. And we look forward to doing more. Dana, thanks for your work and thanks for your time today.
And we're looking forward to good ideas.
So I'm gonna go back and jump in and show a little bit more of what we think about and some of the things that we're most interested in when it comes to our tactics that we follow and the strategy that we have in the College of Ag Sciences. So the idea of strategic planning is that let's set aspirational for our goals, those far-reaching goals that we would like to have, and set some objectives. And let's be sure that we understand the resources that are needed in order to attain those, and then that we have metrics that we determine that signal what our success is. But what's important is part of that journey, the tactics that we follow, and how we plan around those. So what I'd like to do is introduce a framework around how we'll organize our tactical thinking once we complete with our strategic planning around this idea and this commitment that we have to inclusion, diversity, equity, and justice. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is talk through a little bit about what our tactical objective is for this coming year, and in general, when we think about how we implement our strategic plan. So our focus is really about how do we catalyze things? How do we move our community forward in a mindset of inclusive excellence that we're always interested in, a recurring process when we evaluate where we are, that we're striving to be better, that we implement some of those strategies, and then we take those next steps. We want to do that in a space that not only includes what we have within the College of Ag Sciences and the Ag Experiment Station and our research centers, but also in the broader community, because we model that behavior through our students and how we prepare them for entering into the industry, and how we engage with the industry and how we lead in those spaces. So within that, I think there are three sorts of sets of activities, and we'll challenge our departments and our units to think about these activities as they plan for the next year and also the subsequent implementation of the strategic plan. So one of those buckets is around awareness. So are we aware internally of how we're doing when it comes to inclusion and diversity and equity? And are we communicating what that is to the world around us? Can we identify what our gaps are? And then aspirationally lead ourselves to a place where we can improve. So thinking about awareness, a set of activities that increase our awareness and our communication. We then think of a set of activities, tactics, if you will, that are around investment. So what are the strategic investments we make of our passion, of our human capital, our minds, and of our treasure, of our finances? Can we invest in those pieces, those three things, so that we can move toward our aspirational goals? So I'll ask units and departments about, hey, where's your investment going to be of the resources, and what spaces would you like to do that? And then overall, let's think about building a community around engagement in which the expectation is that we'll have a culture of inclusiveness and a culture of equity. And what are the activities in that space that allow for that engagement to take place and really catalyze it? So those are the kinds of tactics that we want to think about as we implement the strategic planning process. I think about some of the tactics that we've engaged in during this last year, some of the things that are pretty exciting. You know, if you're like me, it feels like a long time ago sometimes to think about these. It wasn't that long ago that we had our first Come to the Table talk back in January of 2020, a little bit of a different world at that point, when Nita Mosby Tyler spoke to us in the early keynote session and reminded us about the pathway that you can't have justice unless you have equity, and you can't have equity that takes place, or at least it's helped by having diversity. And you don't get to diversity unless you have inclusion, and inclusive mindset first. And all of those things are really important, and that's the progression that we need to make sure that we invest in. We also said that it was important for us to assess where we were, and we'd engaged in two efforts. One was around the employee climate survey, and one was around a series of interviews that we did when we examined our culture with the help of Nita Mosby Tyler and Carolyn Turner. We released two reports and gave access to our community to those, and we actually did a readout of what the results were and helped to talk about and process together what next steps might be, and left with a sense of urgency that we could do better and that we should do better. Well, and then this happened. You are well aware of what some of the implications of this are. Maybe not in the sense of what our total community experienced, but certainly personally what we experienced. One thing that's been true about the pandemic is that we've done a good job, I think, as a community in speaking to individuals and observing how you interact with one another, of understanding what this means to us through an equity lens, how there have been differential impacts on members of our community, both of the virus, and then also of what our response has been to that, and the economic consequences of that response. I've been really proud about how, as a community, you've taken care of each other. that you've looked out for each other, that you've reached out when you've sensed that people are in need, and you've come up with really neat ideas about how we can help one another through a time that's definitely unique in our set of experiences. I think the good news is that we're beginning to talk about recovery and that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and that we've been doing a very good job. We can stride confidently into the next few months because we know that we can handle difficult times that are like this. Difficult times certainly underscored how we think about the way people respond and the resiliency they have. And we gave away our first College of Ag Science and Ag Experiment Station Inclusive Excellence Awards around this idea of come to the table. Those individuals that received those awards included Tori Anderson in Soil and Crop Sciences, and Sitan Christensen in Ag Biology, Carolyn Keller, who's down at Center Colorado in the San Luis Valley Research Center, and Mike Martin in Ag and Resource Economics. All of those folks deserve accolades for the way they invest their passion and their human capital, and sometimes even their finances to getting behind this effort. So thank you very much to those award winners and all that our folks do. Hey, we're going to give those awards again this year. So if there's somebody that you have in mind that in particular embodies this notion of come to the table, that we can be inclusive and that we can be equitable and that we can be champions for others, keep that in mind and keep your eye out for those nominations so that we can recognize others as well. We gave those awards away virtually for our first time in a virtual environment, and then began to proceed into the summer, thinking about how we're going to adapt to the fall. And boy, we had significant events around the world too that influenced how we thought about race and the difficulties we have in the reckoning that was taking place in the communities around us and in our own community too. I was really proud of what the Student Success team did, our Diversity Catalyst team, and Elias Quinones did in really convening a conversation around racial equity and allyship and how we can all be anti-racist. You know, that book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Kende, was shared among the leaders here at Colorado State University, and we purchased a number of copies too. And then we had a series of conversations and discussions about what this meant to us and how it influenced and how it affected us personally, and then tried to embody those equity lenses and those ideas in the way we had practice and the way we were managing things amidst what was really some challenging times for us all. So very proud of that table topper and how our community engaged in that space and really had a compelling conversation about what we could do and what we should do. Well, there are a number of other table toppers out there, and I actually sent word out to recognize some folks for the great things that they did as well. So what I think I'll do is go ahead and stop this screen share and just walk you through some of the great things that people sent me as they talked about the table toppers, the things that really made a difference when it came to inclusion and equity in our college environment. There's a big shout out to the CAS Inclusive Syllabus Working Group. So we had a group of individuals come together and say, hey, we can do a good job of welcoming people from the very get-go for our students and our student environment if we build inclusive syllabi, and we can engage our students in that space. So that group included Elias Quinones and Kayla Dwyer, Don Filmony for Ag and Resource Economics, Andrew Norton, our master teacher, Noah Roman Muniz from Animal Sciences, who directs the undergraduate programs there, Megan Shapansky in Soil and Crop Sciences, Tori Anderson, and Matt Camper, of course, in his role as an assistant dean for academic programs. So a shout out to those folks for doing such a great job. We advanced the idea of equity when it comes to different roles at the university as we began to work with the continuing contract adjunct faculty committee in the College of Ag Sciences. And they really put together a great rubric for understanding how we evaluate that particular role at the university and how we promote that. So I want to give a quick shout out and a table topper to Sue Ellen Melzer, who is the chair of that group, and the group of folks that worked alongside Sue Ellen, including Sam Cunningham and Nathan Clark and Brett Kirch and Tamla Blunt, Jennifer Buslow in horticulture and landscape architecture, Joanna Holiday, all things HR in the College of Ag Sciences, Courtney John and Matt Camper again for his role. Just did a great job of being able to promote that. I want to take a moment and recognize some of the work that Haley Chenard's been doing for us. Haley's been serving on the CSU Common Reads program, where they've developed a book that all of our students, our freshman students, will read and have conversations about in the coming year that focuses on inclusion and focuses on equity. Haley's been leading helping to lead that conversation at a university level. And I'm proud to say that the book that the students will read next year, that we can participate in too, is going to be about food justice and what it means to have equity in food systems. So they've narrowed this down to a set of books. There'll be a set of choices that students will be able to read. You'll be hearing more about that as time goes on. So just really thankful for the work that Haley has done for us in leading in that space. Some of the things that we've done in terms of student success that are real tabletopper experiences include the CAS Peer Mentor Program that we've started. So we have 14 peer mentors who are students here at CSU. Some of them are on this at this event right now, who've completed 6 training sessions, all focused on diversity and equity and inclusion in order to support a set of 17 first-year students next semester, or actually this semester in the spring of 2021. So really a great table-topping program in the CAS Peer Mentor Program. Also, CAS is really heavily engaged in United in STEM, which is a university-wide effort about engaging students from underrepresented populations into careers and studies in the STEM fields. So CAS has been enthusiastically participating in those, including fostering a relationship between United in STEM and Nutrien, which has been a great supporter of our inclusion activities here in the College of Ag Sciences, and also strengthening our partnership with Together We Grow. We'll hear from Kristen Kirkpatrick, the executive director of that this afternoon. But I want to give a shout out to Sam Holthauser, who's done a good job as part of those developing career pathways for agriculture and for our students, so that she can develop networks and opportunities for folks in the food and agriculture industry. Hey, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Chris Argueso in ag biology. Chris had a great idea that Amy Charkowski, the department head, helped to champion. That idea was, can we create research fellowships for undergraduates, especially those that are from underrepresented populations, knowing that those fellowships will help them to experience research for the first time, that's a high impact success practice, and that can lead to individuals who will enter into STEM fields. Kind of the key thing about this is, so these research fellowships go to students and they actually get paid to participate in that. All of that funding comes from donations, largely from the faculty in ag biology, who've been contributing to that fund and backing up their diversity, equity, and inclusion ideals, their principles, with their treasure, one of those things that they contribute to. So I really appreciate that, and I understand they're still taking donations if you're interested. So get in touch with Dr. Argueso, Dr. Charkowski, if that's something that you're interested in too. In the diversity, equity, and inclusion world, there's been some really great initiatives that have been proposed and followed through by the Department of Animal Sciences. And they have their own DEI committee within that department. And Kayla Dwyer should receive some kudos for helping to lead that conversation. So Kayla has helped to organize a number of training activities that have been very influential and convene conversations within that department. And recently, Kayla and I and Terry Angle have been exchanging ideas about an opportunity to bring a film to campus that really focuses on gender equity in academia. And that's called Picture a Scientist, which explores 4 scientists and what their pathway has been, and some of the obstacles they faced and the resilience it takes to overcome those obstacles as they began their careers and developed their careers in STEM. We can view that because we can purchase a license that anyone in the college and the department can use. So there'll be a screening that'll take place of that film. We have the license available if other departments would like to do that, and we'll be able to participate in that. So we've purchased that screening. Please get in touch with me and Kayla Dwyer if you'd like some more information about that opportunity. Also want to note that in animal sciences, they're doing a great job of leading at the university level when it comes to conversations we're having in the inclusion, diversity, and equity space. That includes the Commission on Women and Gender Equity and the University Standing Committee on the Status of Women Faculty, which is a component of that commission. That's now being chaired by Dr. Jessica Metcalf in animal sciences, and it includes Dr. Noah Roman Muniz as a member. So really appreciate the way that we've stepped up to lead in our university community and our AAS community in supporting what's taken place. Well, there's a lot of table toppers that are out there. I'm sure that you have some. You can add some of those into the chat if you would like to as well. Some of the things that you've seen that have made a difference, that have been part of raising our awareness, that have been part of our investment, that have been part of our engagement. Those tactics that we follow as we reach toward an aspirational goal. Now, I mentioned that really there's a chance for us to be able to learn and start to think about, after we've taken stock, where we'd like to go and understand what that might mean for us. And it's helpful for us to talk to others that have lived experiences that may be different than our own, and live in different places or engage in leadership in different places, to help it to advance some of our ideas. So with that in mind, we've got a great suggestion from Shannon Archibek-Engel that was endorsed by our planning committee for the Come to the Table event, that we might include Dean Deacue Fields III for a conversation about what his lived experience has been, and also how he leads the College of Agriculture at the University of Arkansas. So if you would, do a little virtual applause, help join me in welcoming Dean Deacue Fields to Colorado State University, or at least the virtual representation of that, Dean Fields. Hey, welcome. We're really excited to have you join us for a conversation about what we can do aspirationally in the area of inclusion, diversity, and equity, and what your lived experience has been, and maybe learn a little bit about what next steps that we might be able to take. Just to give a little bit of a preface, Dean Fields, is it okay if I brag about you a little bit?
I guess so.
Hey, Dean Fields joined as the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Food, and Life Sciences in 2017, where he's been in that role, and actually been an associate vice president for the larger agricultural institute that takes place at Arkansas, where you have those leadership roles around everything that has to do with students and research and engagement in those spaces. You came by that from being a department head at Auburn for some time, serving in that role, and that was a place where you were a faculty member for quite a period before moving into that leadership role. At Auburn, you served in essentially the ag economics department there as a faculty member. So that's what your academic training is that you've had while you've been there, and have done a lot of work in a variety of different functions related to being a professor and an extension economist, which means you kind of bring that stakeholder view of what that's been like. So, gosh, it's really been quite a journey, hasn't it? Since just like it has for me from starting out. I would ask you, just as a preface, Dean Fields, did you ever think you'd be a dean when you got started in your career?
Not at all. So I initially thought my journey would be to work for USDA. So it definitely didn't see really academia in the future when I first started. But at the time that I finished graduate school, there was a hiring freeze in 1995. So I ended up going toward academia. So.
Yeah, you had kind of some interesting experiences, I think, when in terms of your lived experience in academia as you got started. And maybe it was, they were real formative about how you think about inclusion and diversity and equity that kind of started that career out. You told me a little bit of a story of what it was like to go to Auburn and interview for your position. Would you mind sharing that with us a little bit about what that was for you?
Sure. So, I was still in graduate school at the time at LSU, but interviewing for positions at the time, and I'll kind of give you the backdrop of that time period. So at that time, this was November of 2001, and so Auburn had just been on national news for a blackface event at a fraternity. And so, my parents would say, don't go there, you should be careful, so you kind of go with guards up then and wondering what you'll experience. So when I got there, met the first person who met me at the elevator, indicated they met me and they said, man, you look more like a football player than an ag economist. And that kind of took me aback. So I'm like, so what does an ag economist look like? And do I really want to be one? And so, but I by the time I got a chance to do my seminar, I'd had 3 or 4 people make almost that exact same comment. So, you know, at the time I had other positions I was going to interview for. So I said, well, okay, this may not be the spot, but I'm going to let them know how uncomfortable that was. So called them out in the seminar, like, you know, I just wanted to set the record straight. I'm here to interview for a position as an ag economist. Professor, you know, name the names. Seem to think I'm here for the football team, but I want to make the record clear. And so when I did that, what happened, the individual who met me at the elevator came back to me and apologized. And he said, you know, I apologize. I didn't have any idea that that would be offensive to you. He said, if someone had told me that I look like a football player, I probably would have taken it as a compliment. So I apologize. So it gave me the opportunity then to discuss with him, you know, why that was offensive to me, or why, you know, it was a problem that to think that, you know, a Black man would be only prepared to be in sports versus use his intellect for a position. And so, you know, what I realized was that this was just a cultural ignorance, is what I'll call it. But, you know, from that conversation, this individual became who I would say is my best mentor and my best advocate while I was there. And I would credit him with a lot of my success in my roles at Auburn. And, you know, I think that one of the things I learned is that sometimes we have to make sure our initial response to what I'll call cultural ignorance is one that opens the door for a conversation versus a confrontation. So, you know, I learned a lot from that one experience.
Yeah, that would be really formative. I would imagine, so I haven't lived that. I don't have that same lived experience that you do, Dean Fields. But I would imagine it is both frustrating, makes you angry to be characterized in a particular way by a comment that's kind of innocuous, right? And it sure takes a lot of grace to allow, to create a space for somebody to realize what happened, as well as courage to call it out, right?
Yes.
Are there other times when in your career that were formative for you in becoming a leader, where you've had to use that courage, whether that be in academia, or maybe it's working with stakeholders in the kinds of spaces that you've been in before?
Certainly. You know, I think that one of the things is, you know, when you're in this role and when you are somewhat rare in this role, you know, and I'll point out that, there are only 2 Black deans or Black deans of colleges of ag at predominantly white institutions at the country. So it's me and Andre at Washington State. And so when you have that as the case, you know, a lot of times people are wondering, you know, do you deserve to be at the table, honestly? You know, so I typically, even in meetings when I introduce myself and I say I'm dean at the University of Arkansas, either there's a look of shock or they're wondering it must be University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, the 1890. So, you know, you have to give a complete resume of, you know, this is basically prove yourself. This is why I earned the right to be here. And, you know, it almost gets to the point that you hate to tell people what you do, because, you know, it's like you have to go through all your credentials and qualifications, get through all of the how in the hell questions that you have to validate yourself. And then you go through all that, and then, you know, you get a seat at the table, and then it's kind of like being the only African-American in a white fraternity, you know. And so it's kind of one of those things of, is there truly that sense of inclusion and belonging that you would expect a lot of times from colleagues, when, you know, they almost still see you as so different that you could potentially be an outlier. So, you know, there are some who are, you know, definitely more comfortable with the conversations and more accepting, but there are others who, you know, still have a very traditional philosophy. But, you know, I think that I'll say pivot points, and there are a lot of for me, a lot of the benefit has been mentoring that I've had over time, and individuals who have been there to kind of help to show me the ropes, and also, you know, helping me understand how to respond in those different situations, because definitely that first response is one where you are thinking, you know, of a retaliatory type response, you know, and being able to foster that conversation. You know, it's one of those things that this is a jacket that I have to wear every day, you know, and so it's who I am, and so have to be prepared for for individuals who think differently. You know, I think, you know, and sometimes people think that, you know, once you've risen to a certain level, you are a faculty member, a department head, or dean, you become exempt from dealing with some of the things that other people deal with. But, you know, I recall the being department head, and I've show quarter horses. So I'm pulling a horse trailer through North Carolina, and I get profiled. And so I have a really nice truck and trailer. I've gone to Maryland to buy a horse, and I'm coming back, and I get profiled. And, you know, it's one of those things of, you know, when does it stop? You know, at what point do you get beyond that? And I don't know what that is, but detained on the side of the highway and handcuffed for an hour and a half as a department head, of course, anger starts to come. But, you know, you're thinking of how do you make it through this situation? You know, how do you, so you have to be, you know, and I guess it was good, you know, growing up in the town that I grew up in, a small town in Louisiana. You know, my dad basically trained me for, you know, the situation, you know, and so I knew what to do and basically practice what to do in that situation. I have 3 sons, and basically they have to be prepared, be trained, be aware of what could happen in all situations. Think of survival skills, because it's you know, people say they don't see color. Well, we want you to see color. You know, there's nothing wrong with seeing color, because when you see color, you see differences, and you understand that the experience could be different. You know, I want every police officer to see color, because they need to understand that when they stop an African American male, they're probably fearing for their lives right then, wondering if they will get beyond that initial encounter. And so I think that it's important that, you know, that we see color, that we acknowledge differences, no matter whether it's color or other differences. We have to realize it, acknowledge it, and then embrace it, start the conversation so that we learn and move forward from it.
Hey, thanks for that. There's a lot of really important things that you said about acknowledging differences. And then I think, you know, in the early remarks that I had, we talked about awareness, right? And just being aware when you walk into a situation about what those differences are, and then maybe how people's lived experiences will affect how they interact, right? Yes. How they communicate, and how important it is to build trust from the beginning. And sometimes acknowledging that you know, this is an awkward moment, or I don't know how to handle this, or hey, I need some help here. Boy, that's really important for people that want to be allies. Yes. That don't necessarily come from folks that have been minoritized or underrepresented. It struck me, you were talking about your 3 sons. You and I share a common experience. We have different lived experiences, but we have kind of commonality. Being ag economists, being in kind of the leadership roles we are now, and having sons that are in college, in our own institutions. Mm-hmm. Can you give me a sense of what the climate is like in Arkansas, and what you're seeing when it comes to students, especially after kind of the difficult times that we had through the summer and into the fall? Where are you guys at in Arkansas?
Yes, you know, so we are, of course, we had you know, right at the time during the summer when the George Floyd event happened, we had a Twitter feed that came out that was #BlackAtUARK. And it was basically, to me, it was believable, but almost staggering when you see the experiences that students, most of these were alums. It was interesting that they were mostly alums, because that was the only time that they felt empowered to speak. When they had been removed from the situation, they didn't feel a fear of retaliation, but they had this feed that was Being Black at UARK that, you know, really called our whole campus to action, to figure out a way to address some of the issues that were basically seen as systemic throughout the campus. You know, this is still the South, but, you know, University of Arkansas is kind of a Midwestern feel still to the South. And the biggest thing was that it was so shocking to a lot of people that they said, this cannot be happening here in Northwest Arkansas. But, you know, it gave us a chance to start the conversation. You know, one interesting thing was, you know, from faculty members to people in our community, them reaching out and asking for an opportunity to, you know, learn more about our experience, the experience of our family, how we saw things, how things, you know, happened for us, what this really meant to us. So it was, it was a big deal. And then having a son here on campus, and just it with students in general. One of the things that we started a conversation, and I think that it's good to start the conversation, but a conversation gets to be not the best thing if there's no action. So I think that people telling the story and telling the experiences, that was a good thing. But I think at some point we were called to action by the students, like, okay, you've heard all of this, what will you do? And I think that that's where we are now, looking at how we really address these issues. Being an administrator, it was interesting and a challenge to me when really realizing that if you have an issue where you have a faculty issue or staff issue related to inclusion, equity, diversity, justice, we really don't have systems in place to adequately address them. That what really happens to that faculty member who is insensitive or who shows a tremendous amount of bias. Really, you have a point where it's brought to your attention, you address it, they go through the grievance process, they get assigned to basically some form of penalty where they meet with someone for a period of time, and it goes away, and they go back 6 months later, they're terrorizing students again. And so really having something with teeth in it is something that we're trying to figure out. How do you deter action? How do you develop a process that really addresses issues and makes a difference when it comes to people's behavior that's insensitive?
Yeah, well, you really identified a gap, I think, that exists. You're right. When it comes to things like offensive language, or maybe it's more of a passive aggressive, right, approach where we're not being inclusive, and maybe it comes in the form of not giving opportunities, or maybe it's in the form of harming somebody's reputation. It's a little difficult from the administrative side to have a process that you feel like you can lean on, that needs to be in that space. I often think that having a culture around you where people call it out, and that we tend to have a culture where we're championing the right things. That's one way to get there. But then, what do you do in this space when you observe it, you see it, and nothing seems to be happening, right? And that's when the frustration builds, and that's when the anger builds. And there's challenges. Have you talk a little bit about systems, or maybe there's innovations that you're using in Arkansas that are things that you can hold up and say, hey, this was a really good idea that we developed, or something that we've done that has really helped us in this space. Can you give a sense of what maybe one of those things were that you have done or experienced?
Yeah, well, and I'll say that, I will say that Arkansas, when I got here, I saw that there were a lot of things that we needed to work on. So honestly, we don't have yet anyone in the college whose focus is diversity, inclusion, equity, or justice. And so COVID, we were advertising that position and had candidates, and this was March of last year. So you can imagine where we are with that. So, but there's some things that I see as on the horizon for what we will do, in that space. We've had the conversations. We have a committee established now within the college that is addressing that will address that those issues. We recently had all of our department heads and administrators in the college go through cultural competence training, and we've made that a mandatory training for all individuals in the college, graduate assistants, everyone, and we're having that training facilitated. And I think it was encouraging for our department heads to go through it and to see them interested in making sure that they could kind of get this cultural competence score for faculty in their departments. And they're asking, when will our faculty be? I would like this done by this time so we can have this as part of a retreat, to really address some of these issues that we see existing. So, I think that the big thing that I'll say is looking at how do you truly develop a community. You know, and I'll give you one thing that I did at Auburn that I hope to implement here in some shape or form. You know, when I got there as a department head, I realized that our students were in clusters and that everybody, the Asian students were in one corner, the white students in another corner, the African students in another corner, and it just didn't feel right. And so I started what we called a multicultural potluck. Each semester, you know, students would have basically students bring a dish. They would the staff would do recipe cards. We would, you know, have 3 students present about traditions, tourism, agriculture, the economy, myths from their area, whatever it may be. And, you know, kind of start looking at areas that we were so much more alike than people realized. And after a few years of doing that, I started to see a transformation in students working together. And it was kind of like that rising tide, I would say, that everybody got better from that, and that students were helping each other in ways that was very important. So, you know, I think that we're going to be investing some in that area. I'm looking forward to having that point person who can help develop, you know, some of the strategies that I have in mind for addressing, you know, some of the issues at this point. So.
Hey, I like that idea of a multicultural potluck, you know, as a way to build community, because it seems like, well, I have a friend who used to say this all the time: if your mouth is full, you can't yell at each other.
That's right, exactly.
But it's also true that there's one thing about agriculture is in food, in kind of the experience that we have around the landscape around us and our natural resources, it tends to pull us together, right?
Definitely.
And that's finding a common experience, and then building that into trust, right? That's one of the keys of
I think you're very right with trust. You know, I think that we have to show our students, our faculty, our staff from diverse backgrounds that we really care and that we want them to be part of the community. You know, we're doing things you know, in terms of our recruiting efforts. So we are the only college on campus that is up in every category for diversity. So, you know, from our student numbers, we're up 18% in African-American applicants. We're up over 30% in Hispanic applicants. We're up like 60% in Native American applicants. And so, you know, why is that? You know, what is it different? This is the College of Ag where diversity is not always common. So what is it that's driving this increase in this college, and everywhere else on campus you don't see it? You know, I think it's the fact that we're trying to be intentional, and that when a student gets here, we show them that we want them to be here, and we want them to know that this is where we're going to take care of you. And you know, it doesn't hurt to have an administrator who is from a diverse background, who they will feel comfortable going to when there's a problem, and know that, you know, it'll be addressed as well as it can be. So I think that's also something we have to look at. How do we empower people and seek out talent at all times?
Yeah, I agree with you. So there's a key part of being able to see yourself, if you're a student, in the people that are the leaders, whether that be other students or whether that be faculty members or administrators too. So if you are more diverse in the way that is represented, that's important. And you said something important about that too, that informs your recruiting of talent, right? So your faculty and your staff and folks that are around you. I think that's something we struggle with here at CSU in the College of Ag Sciences, is being able to make sure that the talent pool that we're recruiting and that eventually makes it through a selection process, that's really well represented. Do you have kind of keys around that? Knowing there's kind of an obvious one, there's a black dean, right? And so you kind of connect, but there has to be other ways too, right? Because of impressions of colleges of agriculture just in general, right? Stereotypes.
Yeah, so you know, it's being, I think we have to be very serious about addressing unconscious and implicit biases in our search processes. It's there. It's called unconscious for a reason, because people don't know what's happening, you know, and so we really have to look at that, because we all will try to gravitate toward people who are more like us, and having that one minority voice on a search committee is really not enough. You know, that person gets frustrated because it's typically, they're very few, so they get on every search committee.
Yeah.
And then they are overworked, and then they're not heard because they're one person, so their opinion doesn't always matter, doesn't have enough weight to influence the group. So if the group itself hasn't gotten to the point where they truly value diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, then we're kind of, you know, still pushing it up, going uphill. So we really have to look at making sure that our leaders see these points as core values and understand that it's a core value of the unit that is something that's a non-negotiable, that is something that we are going to try to make sure we do no matter what, and that there's value in it. That, you know, I've been on search committees where, you know, I can see perfectly that this person will be an outstanding scholar. But the committee, of course, sees something totally different. And of course, they go in a different direction. And, you know, you're sitting here looking, saying, this individual I know will be successful somewhere. And they go somewhere else. I've been on a committee where, you know, someone was in our pool, they didn't make the top 10. They went to another institution, and one of a colleague came back, man, I wish, this was 4 or 5 years later, I wish we could get someone like him. You know, this is how we could diverse, this is the type of person we want. And I pointed out to him that, you know, 5 years ago, this person was in our pool and they didn't make the top 10. So how is it that, you know, you can't see those? It's tough for me when I can see it, but it's you know, it's not seen by others. But, you know, I think we have to really make sure that we are looking at value and diversity, knowing that it you know, having, you know, if we're looking at, and everybody looks like us, thinks like us, sees things the way we see them, then of course, you know, our breadth of what we can do is extremely limited. And we're not gonna, how much growth do you have if everyone around you is just like you? So that, I just think we have to be intentional about it, make sure that from the top, you know, we have to enforce that this is something that we value, that we put incentives behind it. And, you know, it's an invest, you have to invest in it. It's not something that, you know, these, why the pipeline is so slim is because people have seen that, you know, when you apply, you're not going to get an opportunity. So why should I get into this field when I'm not going to get an opportunity to be, you know, the same thing as the person that I graduated right next to? I had a higher GPA, I performed better in class, but, you know, my option is to go to private industry, go to an HBCU. I'm not really welcomed into this community at this predominantly white institution. So, you know, you start seeing those, you know, anyone with that frame of mind, with I say, like, who thinks that way, like a faculty member, you're going to listen to those incentives and go where you see the incentives rewarding you most. And so that's why our pipeline is a lot thinner than we would like it to be, because we haven't nurtured it. We haven't looked at ways to empower those. And we talked about leadership. There are people at every institution, when we do get someone, you know, and their opportunities for advancement, they don't qualify. They've never had the opportunity to develop the leadership skills that they need to do it because someone else has always jumped in front of them. So how do we do that? It may not be creating a position. It may be just letting that person serve as, you know, over special projects that we're doing that gives them an opportunity to see what leadership is like, you know, during our budgeting period, what takes place during that process, you know, things that can help, you know, we have to seek out the talent, look at ways to intentionally build on our talent pool, and you know, the only way we increase that is to do it ourselves as leaders, you know, try to figure out who we see that could be the next leader from a diverse background. Sometimes those opportunities come for others just naturally, just through those relationships. Others are ignored. They feel invisible. They feel like they'll never get the opportunity.
Dean Fields, you said a lot of important stuff there around hiring talent and cultivating talent, right? And that there can be bias in that process, and that people come to the table with lots of different skills. And I really like the idea of building on strengths and growing people into those. And sometimes you got to give folks that may not at first glance have the tools already developed that opportunity so that they can build those tools. But you got to mentor it, right? You can't just leave them in a spot where it's not there. There was also a piece you were talking a little bit about, you know, as leaders, and you mentioned seeing the talent in people, having a committee that isn't necessarily going in that direction. And there is a leadership dilemma around Do you nudge them? Do you call it out? You know, how you handle that a little bit. I think that there's also kind of a broader leadership dilemma about, hey, how much of this is top down and how much do I allow this to be grassroots so that I got agency that are coming up? Do you have anything that are sort of best practices around that? Hey, when is it my role to make it top down, and when is it my role to promote grassroots up?
You know, I'll say it this way. I feel like, you know, we have to make sure that we truly show as leaders that we value it, and we have to invest internally first. And I'm going to give you this example, and it's a kind of different example. The animal scientists will probably appreciate it as much as anything. But so, you know, I showed livestock, and you know, my dad we would, you know, one of the things with showing is they have to look glossy, they have to be shiny and pretty. So we'd invest in all these conditioner sprays, glosses to make them look good, but it wouldn't last long. It'd go away, it'd look dry the next day. So my dad would say, if you keep feeding them right, when you get the inside right, the outside will start to show. And so I think we have to work on getting the inside right, because when the inside is right, the shine becomes natural. So we still have to also continue to nurture it. But right now, I think the idea is, once from the top, you start making sure that it is understood that this is a core value, that it is something that we need, and that our leaders understand that, then it's not us pushing, it's them pulling. They're saying, this is what our community is. If people don't understand that the community is better from having people from diverse backgrounds, then, you know, it's hard to make it happen. You cannot force relationships. Relationships have to be ones that individuals want to be in. It's like a forced marriage. It doesn't last long. And so until we get to the point where we are interested in truly developing those relationships and truly valuing diversity, I think we're continuing to fight an uphill battle. We're just spraying gloss on it, and, you know, once it's done, it goes away. So we really have to continue to invest in the inside and make sure that's right. And it's not something that happens in a week. It's not something that happens in a year. But you know, and there'll be roadblocks, there'll be challenges, but I think we have to continue to push toward making sure that our internal culture is such that we really know that diversity, equity, justice, inclusion is who we want to be and who we are.
Hey, that's spot on. Thanks, Dean Fields. I appreciate that. Your dad has a lot of wisdom. I would say that. And isn't it funny how the older you get, the smarter your parents are?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not very smart to my kid right now.
Hey, I just want to ask one related question, then let's turn it over. We're starting to see some questions in the chat, and maybe you might be able to field some of those and
sure.
Talk through those. But I was thinking that, and I've shared with you previously, but as in your conversation about getting the inside right, and then the outside will come along. There's a unique attribute that is about College of Agricultural Sciences, is that we're so externally focused, right? I don't know other colleges that are really as connected to our community and outward facing as others. And not everybody buys into the level at which we invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion in a university campus, right? So I would say, by and large, when I work with folks in the agriculture community, respect is very important. But they may not understand what inequities exist and what the effects are of those. So I may send a note out about an important equity event at CSU, and I may get some feedback that says, hey, you're a College of Agricultural Sciences, you're not political science, you're not sociology, you're not ethnic studies. Hey, keep your focus on biology and ag sciences. You don't belong in this space. You might get the same kind of feedback. How do you respond to that when you get that feedback from external stakeholders?
Yes. So, you know, I think that when you see that those comments, again, you know, I mentioned cultural ignorance earlier. I think that individuals with that philosophy are afraid that they will lose something if efforts are directed towards diversity, equity, inclusion, justice. So I think that they're afraid that there's something they'll lose. And I think it's important that, you know, we also let them know that it's a non-negotiable value of the institution, and that, you know, it's not a matter of dividing the same pie. It's a matter of expanding the pie, that the pie gets bigger when we include others. We're not taking anything from them. They have to understand that, a more inclusive, comprehensive College of Ag can produce ideas that benefit them in the long run. That we're trying to think outside, get more ideas, broaden our perspective. A philosopher said that he who prescribes the diameter of your knowledge can determine the circumference of your actions. So we want to go beyond what that typical pie is and look at a bigger pie. And I don't think there's a way to be revolutionary or have game-changing advances if we don't have a more inclusive community.
You just noticed I wrote that down. Diameter of our knowledge determines the circumference of our actions.
Yeah.
Boy, it's spot on. That's spot on. Dean Fields, thanks for sharing those ideas with us. If it's okay with you, we'll just open it up a little bit. There's some questions in the chat, and I know that Andrew Norton, who's the coordinator of our Master Teacher program here, initiative in the college, is monitoring that chat. I might just ask Andrew if he could go ahead and toss those questions out, and then we'll respond to some of those.
Sure. Thank you.
Andrew, I'll hand it to you.
Hi, James. Hi, DQ. Thanks for that conversation. That was really great. We have a few questions, and I'll just say to everybody here in the room, please type it into the chat, your question, or that you'd like to ask a question. I'll try to call on everybody in order. So the first question that we have comes from Katie Russell. I'm going to paraphrase it. We've been talking a lot about race today. How are these issues the same or different for issues of gender equity, and particularly gender equity in ag sciences?
Yeah, I think that, when I think of all of this as us having a more inclusive environment. My perspective comes from the perspective of race, but as a leader, I know that I have to acknowledge all perspectives. And, I think that, we have to be sensitive to whatever situation someone is in, making sure that we are addressing things or developing a community where no matter what your background is, that you feel comfortable, that there's a comfortable conversation. And I think that a lot of times, no matter what the background is, a lot of times we don't want to have that conversation. We try to gloss over it and try to keep things moving in a traditional way. So, I think that, when I'm giving it from my perspective, but as a leader, I think our goal is to make sure that we're addressing all phases, no matter whether it's race, religious background, we're looking at an equitable environment. And I think that, some of the things that I mentioned, in terms of developing a community, I think that that's important, and developing true relationships. I think that we devalue the importance of relationships a lot of times with individuals who are not like us. I had a student come to me and they said that, they felt like, that, when they met people, they felt like they needed something, that they were needed, they were expecting something extraordinary. When all they wanted was a genuine relationship. Genuine relationships open doors. They really have us where we can learn more about, other people. And so I think we really need to make sure we're developing those relationships. And we have to ask ourselves, do we really have, people say, yes, I have, it's kind of the common thing. I have a friend that's gay or Black or whatever it may be, but do you really have more than a surface relationship? How many times is that person eating at your table? So those are the type of things we have to look at, no matter what the category we're discussing would be.
James, did you want to add anything to that?
I was processing a little bit and thinking about that some. Katie asked a great question about, what are the similarities, and Dean Fields talks a fair bit about an inclusive community, and some of those being included, not included, those inequities are present, and then the strategies seem to follow the same things. The piece I would add to the idea of having relationships too is that you really need allies who come from those underrepresented populations who can call you out, right? And you can trust them to call you out. So in the space of gender equity, acknowledging that there are two guys sitting in front of you right now that are leaders of their units. It's great to also have leaders who identify as being female, or maybe identify as having not a binary gender orientation, who can say to you, hey, have you thought about this? Or when you're making a choice, what does this look like? Or I can bounce an idea off. And I've had my opinion changed around the way that I've thought about gender equity in the college, because the leaders who identify as female told me, hey, that's not what we need right now, or that doesn't work, that doesn't resonate. Man, was that really helpful advice. So I think from a leadership perspective, and maybe from an individual perspective within the college, to the extent that we can cultivate allies and build trust relationships, that's something that helps us in all areas of equity. And it's really useful to have that. So I encourage that.
Next up, Don Telmany has a question. Don, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, DQ. How are you?
Hello, Dawn.
I'm one of the lucky people who's gotten to know DQ a long time. So I was thrilled to see you on our program. So I'll say kind of what I did. As you know, when we began back in the 90s, it was way more common for us to be hiring and having colleagues that came through the system very similar to us, raised on farms or ranches, went to land grants, had always been a part of land grants. But now we're seeing an increased diversity even in that dimension of people who don't come from those traditional backgrounds. What do you see as either the opportunities or challenges for that particular dynamic affecting diversity, equity, and inclusion discussions?
Yeah, so I would again say that, that is expanding our pie. I think that having the perspective of someone who didn't come from an agricultural background can, and I will say, I like to see the combination. I like to see a portfolio of people, but when they get an opportunity to interact with those from the rural background and the more traditional background, I think that everybody learns from it. I've seen that happen, where students who they think in a different way. They have learned at a different pace. They bring a different idea to the table, and I think that it's a good thing when we are encouraging that, bringing more people in from different backgrounds. I think that it continues to expand that pie.
DQ, I'm curious. In Arkansas, what's the proportion of students who would say they're from a production ag experience versus those that don't? Do you have a good sense of what that is?
Yes, when I got here, I was kind of surprised. About 60% of our students are from our largest metropolitan areas in the College of Ag, so 3 counties. So that's right here in Northwest Arkansas and Little Rock. And so we struggle with attracting that group of students from our true agriculturally based areas, like in our Delta region. So it's, really, when you look at it, you're probably looking at about 25-30% of students from that traditional ag background, and from a true farming background. Some are from rural backgrounds, but not necessarily from a farming background. So that's a small portion.
Yeah, it's very similar actually in the College of Ag here too. That would be how people would define their experience, and there is a divide, right? So students come in and see the culture part of agriculture sometimes when you're from a rural area and you've been part of that, and see that as being sort of close to you if you're trying to get in and get new. And then I think for the students that come from those kinds of backgrounds that are linked to production agriculture, sometimes they feel as though they're a dwindling population, and they circle the wagons even tighter, around that space. And so that kind of causes that divide to grow. I think there's a piece, and maybe to Don's question too, there's a piece where in a college, we can create spaces where those students can interact, as you said, Dean Fields. And one of the ways that we do that is taking our students out to the research farm and doing some foundational agricultural literacy pieces, or knowledge of agriculture maybe is better, and some lived experience in that space, and are programs that we need to go out. Because if you're a student for the first time, you're seeing it, maybe if you don't even want to be in the production side of that value chain, but you're seeing it for the first time, it breeds familiarity, which breeds confidence, which means you can ask that next question, and you're less likely to feel like, hey, I'm going to have a stereotype applied to me because I come from somewhere else, and you're more likely to be retained. And then I think what's true from students who come from small towns, say in Colorado, from agricultural backgrounds, and coming to Fort Collins is coming to a big city with lots of people. And maybe what they've been hearing is, boy, that's a liberal place to come to, right? There are political differences that inhabit what the conversation is. Going out to that research farm and seeing things that feel a little bit familiar to you, that breeds confidence in you, right? That there's connections that are there. And so I think that's, to that extent, there's challenges and there's opportunities if we can build spaces where we can acknowledge what those differences are and build on what we have. So.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. So we've started something similar where we have a bus tour every semester where we take students out to, farms to just learn agriculture in the state. And we try to have a student from that area as part of the tour to discuss it. We also realize how few faculty members have that knowledge and true experience and background in agriculture. So we try to make sure we have some of our young faculty who rotate through that experience as well to be with the students. So it's been a good thing to, have students actually put their hands on agriculture, and throughout the state.
So do the faculty and the students join each other on the bus? They all get on the bus and they
Yes.
go together? Yeah, it's not separate then.
It's
kind of that's a neat way to do it. Yep.
Yeah. So you're looking at probably 35 students and 3 or 4 new faculty members, but faculty members will have a chance at some point. The students are kind of rotating through, so we don't usually pick the same faculty members to go.
So John McKay says that he has a question. So John, if you would like to unmute and ask your question, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Dean Fields. It's been great hearing your experience and perspective, and appreciate you joining us. And I think my question is for both of you. So I get in the U.S. 1% of people are farmers or ranchers, and approximately 1% of them are black. Of that 1% are black, and they're not in Colorado, by the way. That 1% of 1%. And so historically, for our college, I would say we think of our stakeholders, as maybe wheat farmers. That, again, are some very small percent of the population, and also, tend to not be very diverse, or maybe even embracing of diversity. And so, I guess, what is both of your perspectives on sort of how we're pivoting from that view of stakeholders, obviously not leaving them out, but James touched on this a little, but communicating with them why it's not just them, and and sort of where we go forward from here.
Well, I really think that that traditional stakeholder base will always be there. Our challenge is that community that Dawn actually just brought up, and how do we get them to see what we do in agriculture is something viable for them to participate in. I think that, there are opportunities, but so few people understand what it is we do in agriculture. So I think that our big thing is messaging. With such a small percentage of the community actually involved in agriculture, I think colleges are tasked with messaging who we are, what we do, what opportunities we have. What was it, about a 2015 study from Purdue that showed the gap between students graduating in agriculture and jobs that are available annually. We have to look at how we bring a different group in to fill that gap and expose them to actually what we do. So I would say that, it's a matter of continuing our focus. We'll still have that traditional community, but looking at how we bring a different dynamic into it.
Fields, I think that's spot on. Preparing that workforce. So what we're thinking about when we talk about those jobs is the whole value chain, right? And to John's point, the production side of agriculture, we're not going to have more acres necessarily in the United States, and we're beginning to continue to replace labor with capital. Although we have a lot of kind of a neat growing farming enterprise and small farm groups that are coming together. I'd be interested to find out just the differences in diversity between those groups that we need to be able to do that. But probably the growth is throughout the value chain, right? And so we really need to be prepared to be part of that value chain. And we can both promote that we are within a College of Agricultural Sciences and how we serve that entire value chain, and also encourage our students to become part of that and be prepared to be within that. So I think that skill set development becomes important. And then related, John, I think to what you said is, when I talk to what we might call traditional agricultural stakeholders on the production side, I always encourage them to realize that they need to be at the table in this space. That there tends to be a little bit of, hey, I'm not going to be part of there, put up a boundary, I'm not going to participate in discussions around inclusion and equity and diversity. But really, those stakeholders need to define that space and be present in it, or else it'll be defined for them by somebody else. And they miss out on opportunities because they're not in that space. They can be advocates and they can be promoters of others that are not in that traditional space to become part of the value chain. And there's more strength in being able to do that. And if you stand back and wait, not only do you miss the opportunity, but you don't inform the opportunity. And that can be to the detriment of the industry.
Okay, we have another question. This one is from Tori Anderson. So Tori, if you want to unmute and ask, that'd be great.
Hi, so my name is Tori Anderson. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as a researcher in the Soil and Crop Sciences Department. And it was not really a question exactly, but I was thinking about what Dr. Pritchett said when he was talking about needing more folks in the space to be calling out when injustices are happening. And I just sort of wanted to advocate for the fact that I think that folks like myself and others who hold several or any majority identities should also be the allies that are calling out when these injustices are happening, instead of putting that burden entirely on the folks who the injustices are happening to. And so I think particularly as we talk about sort of the majority identities that exist, particularly in colleges of agriculture, I think we're positioned in a space where we can really be good allies to be calling each other out on these things. And just wanted to, so I feel bad because it's not actually a question, but maybe what are your thoughts around that? And thank you for being here and having this conversation with us.
Well, I'll just speak. I agree totally that, you know, in a healthy community, those individuals from the majority would be those who are the ones who have the courage and confidence to speak out against injustices. And you know, it's one of those things that if you're not speaking out, you know, you could be seen as promoting. So we want to make sure that people are comfortable making a statement when they see things that they really don't see as right.
Yeah, I want to echo what Dean Fields said, that silence often indicates support, right? And that you're allowing that complacency means you're allowing it to happen. So it is important to be able to speak out when you observe it and when it's brought to your attention. There's a subtlety, maybe a nuance in that too, Tori, that the culture that we live in today, boy, things escalate pretty doggone fast. And so calling out is important, and it also needs to be done in a way that's constructive, in the sense that you can call it out and then there's an and that's part of that. And here's how we can get it better, or and here's how we'll have a conversation in this space, and here's the grace that we need to go forward. Because I worry about polarization that takes place, and the escalation that takes place, and how we're not necessarily building community in those spaces. So I encourage folks that are from could we say it's overrepresented population rather than underrepresented? The overrepresented population, hey, call it out, and also make sure that you do it with grace, because you have privilege to be able to do that, so that it leads to something, so that it leads to better community. That's really important. It's really important to have that perspective.
Are there any more questions? I'm not seeing many more in the chat. There are some great comments and thank yous while you were talking, so I encourage both of you to go read through those. But if there are no more questions, I'll turn it back over to Elias.
Team, I'll tell you what, I'm here in my office and it's just me in our building, but I'm cheering, I'm getting excited. I just couldn't be more excited about the discussions that's had and Dean Deacue, what an honor it is to have you here. Dean Pritchett, to be able to lead this discussion in the way that we have, and to be able, we have this recorded. So we're going to continue to use this as a resource to build our team and our work here in the college, to move forward and to enhance our efforts. So thank you both for just the amazing work that was done today. I just want to remind our team that to please return back at 1 for our special guest with Kristen Kirkpatrick, and Together We Grow. And but Dean Pritchett, the floor is yours, sir.
Hey, thank you, Elias. I just want to extend my thanks to Dean Fields too, for sharing a conversation and sharing your personal experiences and the way that you're addressing challenges as a leader and as a parent and as a citizen of your community. So really appreciate that. Appreciate your authentic voice in this space and the intention that's there, and hope that we can live up to some of the very best that we heard you speak of today. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, everyone, thanks to you for coming to the table too. Looking forward to seeing you this afternoon with Kristen Kirkpatrick of Together We Grow. So be safe, get out, stretch your legs. The weather still looks like it's nice out there. We better take advantage of it while we got the chance. And we'll see you at 1 o'clock.
Great day, everyone.